Welcome back to Musée Park, where I'm here dressed exactly like the car I'm here to drive. This is the ND2 Mazda MX-5 / Roadster / Miata RF. I'm here driving this car today because I've driven the NA, the NB, I own an NC, and I drove an ND a couple years ago, but it's been a while and I kind of forgot what they were like. And originally the reason why I bought my NC was I drove an ND, thought it was absolutely wonderful, wanted a Miata, couldn't afford an ND, wound up getting an NC, and pretty much what I want to know now is how does this car compare with the other three generations, which one's my favorite, and do I regret not saving up a bit more money to get an ND? So styling-wise, the ND is widely considered to be the best-looking Miata, and I both agree and disagree about it. This, especially in RF with the top down, this is an achingly beautiful car from most angles. But there's a funny thing that happens to me when I look at an ND for too long from the front. I start noticing something about it that don't quite look right. I still think it's a striking car, but if I look at it too long, it's like one of those celebrities where you're aware they're a celebrity and they're beautiful, but the longer you look at them, you start going, wait, I noticed this don't look right, but they're still beautiful. That's kind of how I feel about this car. Compared to my NC, at a first glance, this is a more beautiful and striking car, but for some reason, I like the chunky looks of the NC a bit better. So in terms of interior styling, there's no contest. The ND is by far the most beautiful interior, and because I'm an old man, I really do like this tan leather and black contrast. I don't know what it is. I know when I was in my 20s, this would absolutely repulse me, but now this is a very beautiful interior, especially with the body paint colored panels. I love it. This is by far the best looking interior of any generation of Miata. However, the one trade-off between this and the NC is it does feel tighter in here. It has more of an NB feel. Like the NB kind of felt the tightest, and this is clearly a bit bigger and more comfortable than the NB, but it has that same tight feeling as it does. The NC is easily kind of the biggest and most comfortable to sit in. So if comfort is your absolute priority in terms of space, the NC is the car to get. Otherwise, the interior of the ND is unbeatable. So one of the bigger drawbacks of the ND compared to the NC is practicality, and the trunk space is one of those issues. This trunk is significantly smaller than my NC's. Can you still get a couple of weekend bags in here? Yeah, but also the opening's pretty small. And I've personally transported computer equipment for a friend. I got a bunch of giant international trip duffel bags in the car. Well, one in the trunk, one in the passenger seat when I was trying to move houses. And it was surprisingly useful. Unfortunately, the ND's, it's a usable trunk space, but if someone wanted to throw me in here, I don't want to be in there. All right, on the road in the ND. And I've said this in all my Miata videos previously. There's something very familiar about being in any Miata. Like when I first got into this car in the morning, I did notice some differences and I was kind of pointing them out to myself. And then after about 10 minutes, I stopped noticing and I just felt completely at home in this car as if I've owned it for years. Like all of my driving habits, like where my elbow rests, what I do when the top's down, how I rest my hand on things, that was all the same. All the ergonomics are the same across generations, and these cars just are more similar than they are different. Any generation of Miata you get into, after about 10 minutes, you forget which car you're in and just enjoy it, because these are just such fun cars. And the Mazda engineers just did such a good job preserving that same Roadster magic across all of the generations. With that said, there are some differences that I did notice and need to be addressed. So, the biggest difference of the ND compared to the previous generations is the fact that this car feels a bit more serious. And it's because it's a modern car. It's stiffer, it has the best engine, it has the most refinement. It's still very good fun to drive. Compared to other modern cars, this is a breath of fresh air. It really is. However, after driving the NA, NB, and NC back to back to back, and then this car, I noticed I'm not smiling and laughing nearly as much as the earlier cars. And the NA and the NB actually made me smile the most. As I drove it, I was laughing, like actually loudly laughing every now and then, because of how fun and just characterful those cars are. And this car just lacks the same character that those older cars do. But compared to a modern car, it's so full of character, it's so much fun. It just lacks that little magic that the older cars had. So this is the ND2 MX-5, and in Japan, the soft tops only come with the 1.5 liter engine. The RF comes with the 2-liter engine, and this is the updated one with the 180 some odd horsepower. And this is a seriously quick car. You drop down a gear, and the engine actually picks up revs very fast, and it's just a seriously fast car compared to the previous generations. And everyone's probably thinking, that's a good thing. I don't think this is going to be a popular opinion. This car's too fast. And you're probably thinking, no, there's no way a car can be too fast. In Japan, we have retarded speed limits. Everything is very, very low, and the police like to give you tickets. So, in the older cars, yes, they were slower. That meant you could rev out the engine, really enjoy it, and still not be going that fast. This car is genuinely quick, so you'll break the speed limit immediately without thinking about it. And because this is a more refined modern car, the sensation of speed is less than the old cars. So my NC, I know, is slower than this car, but it feels quicker. And it's just because it lacks that little bit of refinement that the ND has. So, personally, I think the engine to get, for Japan at least, is genuinely the 1.5 liter, because you can enjoy it a bit more on the public roads. If you're going to track the car, yeah, the 2 liter is by far the most potent and significant engine in the history of the Miata, and you should get that for track use. But if you're just going along these gentle, curvy roads, I think the 1.5 liter is the one to get. So another thing I've noticed about this car, there's a lot of reviews that say this is a return to the NA. The NC was too far in the wrong direction. This is a return to the NA. It's more pure, blah, 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 blah. This drives like my NC. Like, it's most closely related to the NC in the way it drives compared to the other two generations. And it's because it's a modern car, and it's because it has more refinement, and it's because the body structure is more stiff. Of course, it's going to feel closer to the next newest car. Okay, now this is a very twisty bit of Musée Park. How does this car handle? It's a Miata. It handles beautifully, and it's really good fun. In terms of describing how it handles, it's a mix between the NC and the NB. It has that same planted, stable feeling that the NC has, because this is a more modern and stiff chassis, but it has that sort of playful roll that the NB had. In terms of overall handling though, there's something weird about this car compared to the NC. The NC, I feel, is the more stable car. This car, once you get to the limit, it rolls a bit more. And it's very easy to slide the tail out. That's actually really good fun, but if you're someone who likes a bit more stability in the rear end, it could catch you off guard and scare you. If you're someone who's more confident about throwing this car into a slight drift, it's going to be a little bit more fun. But again, if you're not that kind of person, it can possibly scare you. So the steering of this car is kind of controversial. This is the only generation of Miata to feature an electronic steering rack. Now, originally, I remembered this being worse, but possibly because I was driving an ND1. The ND2 version that I'm driving today, the steering is a lot better than I thought it would be. But the hydraulic steering in all the previous generations of Miata do feel significantly better because they're more linear and constant. This tends to weight up a lot more the faster you go. If you're going slowly, the steering gets unusually light. And that's just to help you steer around in the parking lots and everything. I personally like the steering to feel about the same at all times and to give me feedback when I need it. But you will forget about that very quickly. I only say this because I've driven the previous versions back to back to back to this one. If you don't, this steering's actually going to feel perfectly fine. The only thing is, yes, it gives good feedback, yes, it feels good, but because it's an electronic rack, it doesn't feel as organic as the hydraulic steering racks from the previous generations. It feels more like a good steering wheel that you buy to play Gran Turismo on. It gives a lot of good feedback and everything, but something about it still feels a bit fake and electronic. Again, if you're driving this car by itself, it's fantastic. You will not notice the steering issues. If you're driving it back to back with the older ones, yeah, the older ones had better steering. All right, so now I've driven all 4 generations of Miata back to back in a short period of time. And when you do something like this, everyone always wants to ask you, which one was the best? And I have 2 answers. One is going to be very irritating, and the second one will be an actual conclusion. The irritating answer is, they're all good. There is no best one. And what I mean by that is, they're all different in their own ways, and they all have their own character. So depending on what you're looking for in a car, there will be a generation that best suits you. So for example, if you're used to the modern conveniences of new cars, get the ND. There's nothing better, it's the most modern, and for a modern car, it is incredibly good fun. If you enjoy a classic car and you like those old school feelings, NA is clearly the best one. If you want a car that's the most toy-like and most fun, you get the NB. If you want the most practical Miata, you of course get the NC. So depending on your needs and what you like in a car, the answer will be different. So that's what I mean by there is no best one. Personally though, I'm very happy to report, after driving this, I have no regrets getting my NC. It's not to say the NC is a better car than this. There are places that this is better, there are places the NC is better, but the one place the NC is better is, it's so much more practical. There's so much more space in the cabin, there's so much more space in the trunk. I've moved house with my NC before, I've helped a person empty out his office with my NC before. You cannot do that in the ND. And I've driven up and down Japan. Again, the NC is kind of the best grand touring car, and it's still a Miata, so it's still fun in the mountains. So for me, the NC is #1, the best. What's #2? The NA, because I could not stop smiling and laughing. the entire time I was driving the NA. That was so much fun, just because it was such a classic. And again, that V Special Edition I drove, the inside was beautiful, and it just looked like a classic gentleman's British Roadster. Loved it. If I had to buy another car, probably be the NA. Third is kind of a tie between the NB and the ND. I love the NB because it was such a toy, but the ND, the modern conveniences, the beauty of it, it kind of matches the fun and joy that the NB brings. So I kind of have first, second, and a tie for third. So again, the irritating answer is there is no best one. It depends on what you want in a car. If you're looking for the best car, the NC is clearly number one, and I'm kind of relieved to say I bought the right car.